Good morning. Welcome to session 2. Track 2, I mean. 1020 track 2 session. Paul Braren has worked for IBM since 1995 in a wide variety of hands-on consulting roles, most involving Intel-based server installations. Experience includes over a decade of virtualization deployments using IBM, HP, and Dell gear at a variety of customer sites across America. His role included designing and deploying customer software tuning labs, data centers, and classrooms across the globe, including secret clearance sites only. Paul is currently working as an IBM XIV technical advisor with dozens of Connecticut and Massachusetts customers. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Braren.
Thank you. This is a lot of fun being here. Frank Quinn invited me. We were at a Microsoft user group a little while back, a year ago. He was like, Paul, do you think you could give a similar pitch? It wasn't a pitch, it was a live demo actually. That's what I did. And that's what I'm going to do again today. And I'm going to try to do it over Verizon LTE for a bit of security. So I'm going with a hardwired USB. Kind of figuring the place I'm at. I'm going to emphasize build security. What you're going to see is a home lab that's temporarily set up. And my focus today is going to be mostly live demo, not so much PowerPoint. I'm not selling anything. I've been going to user group meetings. I worked at IBM. Waltham. Anyone been there before for Wayne Street? 2 people left. I worked there for a decade. It was a data center with a big glass wall like this. Helped manage the server room there. That was a lot of fun working with software developers who come to us for 2 days to 2 weeks. That was from 95 to 2005. And recompiling the 32-bit code, getting ray arrays going, benchmarking, tuning, all for free. So they love this. That was a nice job. But finally now I'm working out of my home office in central Connecticut, in Wethersfield, Connecticut. And it's a great opportunity after flying around about 30 to 50 states to finally be able to work from home and meet customers right in my home state all around me, doing XIV storage work. Partly after all that flying and all that time in hotels with giant 17-inch laptops with a RAID 0 array for my D drive for built-in speed for reads and writes and solid state for my C drive. I tend to fly with a lot of hardware. I didn't really care about being small. I cared about being productive and fast. When you're a consultant at a customer and you have to get VMware up on 14 blades in 1 week flat, including seeing the SAN and all that, that's what we do. We fly with stuff, help rack and stack, flash the firmware, install VMware, make sure we install a bit of Linux and Windows OSs on there, show how to deploy from templates, show how to put it on the SAN, and then fly out of there on Friday. I did a lot of that. It was a lot of fun working with customers on that. Most of them, probably not so much like in the room, were a lot of them right out of college and really never played with Linux in their life. So, not that I'm really an expert at it, but I was just showing the basics of the ropes of when you install Hyper-V back in 2006, unlike, when you install Microsoft Hyper-V, you don't need to know, much about command line really. Back in 2006 on VMware ESXi, you kind of did, even just moving a CD image into the infrastructure. I'd be teaching them the ropes, WinSCP, PuTTY, those basic little things that pretty much you guys probably know in the room. All right. The other luxury of being home, finally, working from home, is I started a website 2 years ago, tinkertry.com, and there I have over 300 articles, probably 10% of them about virtualization, and other tips and tweaks and tricks. So, just a quick shout out to that. Again, it's not selling anything, it's just stuff I've come across in the field, but also some of the articles are pretty well read as far as getting a certain RAID controller, LSI, working on VMware. When you're a homebrew enthusiast making something yourself, you're not really supported in a lot of the stuff you've got to do yourself. And that's what the website is, a lot of it is about. A lot of the articles just kind of focus on how do you get going when you have no support and you're doing all the work yourself. So today's presentation will be here tonight. My presentations. Super Guides try to pull together a bunch of my different articles like VMware. There's a lot to it, right? From booting the machine and configuring to boot off a USB key. And you install a USB key. Last weekend, getting ready to come here today, I installed VMware's ESXi 5.1, update 1. That came out April 25th. Anyone in the room plays with VMware and already knows this? I want to show of hands, anyone aware of that? You're actually that much into VMware, you follow that they came out with a new release later in April. One guy, okay. So most of you aren't. It's good to know the audience a bit. Not rocket science really getting going. You can install it on a USB key. For me, I pulled out my production USB key, which is my VMware betas I'm playing with, shut it all down, and then just stuck it in a little $20 USB key and went ahead and installed ESXi 5.1, hacked the host files because I don't have real DNS at home, and just got ready for this presentation. About 2 or 3 hours on a Saturday last weekend. Not that big a deal to rebuild your infrastructure if you want every 60 days. The license keys on the free trial of VMware's free hypervisor that you can download, just Google VMware free hypervisor, you'll get a nice ISO to download. You boot off the ISO, install it on a USB key, it reads off the USB key, your operating system's now up. That's the basics of getting going with VMware. Today, I'm going to go a bit beyond that, of course, and show you some live demo of the results of once you get it all built up. Ooh, what went around? Okay, so, just quickly, what kind of audience? This is the kind of user groups I tend to attend. I was at VMware user group at VMUG in Connecticut, the Connecticut Convention Center in Hartford, just last Tuesday. Gave a similar presentation. There was about 300 IT professionals there, and like 5% of the people are familiar faces and actually customers of mine too. But a lot of guys like me, we play around in evenings and weekends. It's our hobby too, not just our day job, right? So certification's key. Like even giant companies like IBM, it's getting harder and harder to justify travel and get to VMworld every year, and even getting going with certification, it's a tough sell when it's, I think it's still at least $3,000 for that 1-week class to get going with VMware to be VCP, VMware Certified Professional, very basic level. Kind of like MCSE was back in maybe the late 90s with Microsoft. There's now tens of thousands, it's not that big a deal anymore. But it's still $3,000. You can pass the test, but you're not going to get the little diploma until you take VMware class. Move on. But that's what a lot of people try to build home labs. When traveling the country, a lot of people said, I have limited money, I have maybe $1,000 or some hand-me-down server at work. What can I do efficiently? And that's the other thing. We'll get into efficiency. A nice, efficient server. So, for me, these things were important, and I wanted to be able to do them 24/7. I had enough of horsing around with VMware, playing with VMware Player or Workstation on a laptop. You can only do so much on a laptop, and you run out of steam. You need memory. And desktops, even a Core i7, a modest machine from 2 years ago that I built, where the machine itself with memory and 32 gig of RAM, under 1,200, and then a serious RAID adapter bumped the price up to 2,200. Still, that's a remarkable thing you can do with about 2,200 bucks, leaving it running 24/7. It's using about 120 watts, even with 7 hard drives. It's not that big a deal. 2 light bulbs. So compare that to a Dell, HP, IBM server you might get hand-me-down from work with dual power supplies, ECC memory, loading up 16 slots. That thing is like leaving 2/3 of a hairdryer running in your basement, roaring away. That's $1,000 electricity a year in Connecticut. I'm not going to do that, couldn't do that, didn't feel right. And after years of that, you get hand-me-down stuff that you just can't leave running. I figure I want to build this. I want to just have this running and also back up all the machines in my family. Flash forward to today, I've got 12 machines backing up every night. They wake up in the middle of the night, half of them are not in my home, they're over a VPN, back up whatever changed from the day before, and they go right back to sleep. It's using Windows Server 2012 Essentials, previously known as Windows Home Server. Okay, we'll move on. When certification or when you're finally working at home, kind of good to have something that you can use on. This is physically what mine happens to look like. There's a whole lot of options. Just $120 case happens to get you a whole lot of drive bays. Fans up here with a filter, and then 6 more drive bays that are replaced in a traditional 5 1/4 slot. You can stuff 6 solid-state drives, which run cool. You don't even need to worry about fans. There was actually fans in this enclosure. I just pulled the fans off, so I don't need the noise in the walls. Those are all solid state. So old hand-me-down solid states from 3 or 4 years ago, they get stuck in the ESXi platform. Why? Because it can happily move VMs at will, storage vMotion. How many people know what vMotion is in the road? Just okay, so at least 2/3 of you have played with Hyper-V or VMware or something where you've moved from one server to another. Well, in a home lab like this, where it's all in one unit, you're just moving from one disk to another. But when you thin provision on a solid state, you can fire up Windows 8, Windows 7, Linux. They're only using up 8 to 12 gig on the solid state. You can jam a lot on 120 gig solid state that way. You just thin provision it. The operating system, the guest VM thinks it has a terabyte, you just log in and tell it what you think it has. And then you just keep an eye over the storage so you don't fill up these drives and run out of physical space. which I've done, and VMware handles it quite well. No corruption. SSDs don't handle it so great because they get a little slow. You film 100%. All right, so next slide. All right. Heat, noise, power, we talked about all that. If you like to fiddle, great. I'm not trying to convince everyone in the room that fiddling or building your own machine where you're inserting the CPU in the socket, putting in the memory DIMMs with your thumbs. If that's your bag, great. If it's not, Dell Refurb or HP or IBM, whatever hardware gear, you're probably going to want to buy like a tower workstation class thing rather than a server thing for refurb 3-year-old discount or something, right? If you go 5 years old, you're probably going to run into trouble and burn way more watts than you should. So that's just some general advice. But running either VMware or Microsoft Hyper-V, the hardware's gotten a lot less picky. You don't have to be nearly so choosy. A whole lot more drivers built in these days. If possible, you still want to pick something that's on a supported list from those companies, but that's not always possible. So I suspect a lot of folks in the room are kind of like me. You don't mind it so much when things go wrong, when it's on your own systems. You can learn from it, you fix it. You don't necessarily want to spend all your free time, evenings and weekends, fixing everyone else's problems. And if you've already solved it in your own world, and you don't really care to reinvent the wheel or even, help someone with a hosed laptop, you're a lot better off just covering yourself and your own precious time with daily backups like I do. If someone hoses their machine, I'll roll it back to the night before they host it, and enjoy the rest of my Saturday seeing Star Trek like last night on Friday. It should be good movie, by the way. That was a lot of fun. All right. So that's me. All right. PAL, and we talked a little bit about that. Obviously, running a variety of servers. So the folks in the room, Linux, you're trying to juggle a lot of operating systems, and you want to play with maybe virtual networking. I think I'll focus the live demo on that. I'll just show a hand. We'll decide. What do you want me to click on with the mouse? What are we going to set up today in the live demo? I'm kind of thinking networking might be your bag. You might want a private network. You might want a public network. You might want both. You can do all that with 1, 2, 3 physical NICs on your home machine. That's where it gets pretty cool, whether it's Hyper-V or VMware. There's a lot you can do to kick the tires on security software. And just like you have apps for your phone, well, you have the virtual marketplace from VMware to download a whole lot of free VMs, whether it's an iSCSI or NAS device. You download the appliance, you point your browser to it to administer it, and now you're learning iSCSI appliance in the weekend, simulating left-hand networks or iSCSI. There's lots of appliances like that to learn and teach yourself as IT pros. All right. And then finally, the demo. There's different bits and pieces. Some of these you're going to be interested, some not so much. But just pointing out, affordable is the focus here, right? This RAID enclosure I showed you on the picture screen, upper left corner, that thing is affordable. That's $180 in the upper right corner there. So 4 drives, push a button on it, it becomes a RAID 5 device. It stripes and handles the parity. It's been running for 2 years in my basement, and another one in my mom's basement. We'll be doing site-to-site replication, off-site storage, my personal cloud, right? There's some stuff I have no desire to put in any kind of other cloud. Dropbox and others routinely getting security issues. So, off of the back of this, commodity consumer stuff like USB 3.0. Not really so well handled on Hyper-V for Microsoft or with VMware, but it's getting there. I can touch upon that. But basically, you can pass through your blue USB 3.0 cable to a VM and say, hey, virtual machine Windows 2012 Server Essentials, you now have dedicated access to this USB 3.0 device. Up comes Device Manager, it sees it, you can format it as 5 terabytes, one RAID array. 5 terabytes, that's key. Currently, VMware, several people don't know, you have a 2 terabyte per VM limit, right? So you can get around these things, you get a little creative, and that's what I like horsing around with. Getting something working that I can't find anyone else on Google talking about, and then just typing up an article about it. And it's just fun because the feedback I get and the fixes. If I make a mistake, folks will let me know very quickly. I put it right there in my public website, right in the front page, anything you comment, it's right there for the world to see within 2 minutes. Here's a bunch of links that'll all be with the presentation tonight. All right, so I'm going to get right into the demo. I'm going to start with the first one just to convince you we are live. So I mentioned I'm going to show you a live webcam view. Let's just start with that. So the setup, first of all. Personal hotspot mode, yes, whether you're Android, iOS, whatever. Some sort of sharing. I'm using the USB cable, so I'm not using anything wireless. And I tested the speed out there. And I still have 2 bars. So if the speed is not acceptable, I might have to cut over to their guest network. But I always try to go wired network if I can. Next piece, VPN. So I'm using LogMeIn Try not to give away too much there, but there's my VPN. So anyone familiar with LogMeIn? Only 1, 2 people? Okay. A nice way for me to do a public demo like this with private IPs like 10.10.1.5, which means nothing as far as you getting into my home. Important little parts, but more important for me, it's just an always-on persistent way for my kid's machine away at college to back up every night also. There's a little Mac Mini, whether it's booted OS 10 or dual booted to Windows, or running a virtual machine of Windows with VMware Fusion. Doesn't matter, that thing can back up every night over VPN. So Hamachi's a free way to do that, and there's there's actually a Linux client for that too. So a way for you to join multiple machines of different household family members you might have, and have them all able to ping each other magically, in the nutshell. That's Hamachi. So I'm using that partly as the glue to hold this thing together. So I'm on a public, 4G, yes, 4G LTE Verizon network right now, and then I've got my VPN going. So let me go ahead and ping my router at home and just convince myself this demo will work. That looks good. So I'm on my home network, basically. All right. My DHCP server at home is my router. It's leased this laptop and IP address for me to have Hamachi working here. That's how it works. It just passes it right through. So printing, network shares, all of it just works. All right, the Vsphere Client. This thing's kind of going away, by the way. And they're trying to move folks to web client. And this is the ugliness you deal with in a home lab. That doesn't look too red in this room, but that's a bright red, right? That's Chrome, warning you. Yeah, when you don't have real DNS like you do at work or in a test dev lab at work, you have a workplace where you can horse around with hardware, there you probably have a real DNS serving you. At home, you just have a Cisco or Netgear or Linksys or some sort of router just handing you DHCP, most people. And that does pose some challenges, whether it's Hyper-V because you got to do the Active Directory thing, or VMware because you got to kind of deal with this annoyance. But you know what? If you're just doing kind of trialware or rebuilding or horsing around, you can live with this stuff. It's not that big a deal to work around, especially if you're rebuilding a machine every 60 days or something. I'll just point that out. All right, so there's the future of VMware is through the Vsphere web client. But yeah, it's got drawbacks and some speed drawbacks. So for a live demo, I'm going to stick with what's fastest. So we'll have to see if we get decent speed. If we don't, I have port forwarding set up and a machine doing remote desktop connection that's at home. So I'll use that as my jump box. I'll hop into that machine with remote desktop. And then there, on the local subnet, it'll point to the vCenter server and come up. That speed looked reasonable. The login takes about how long you want. So I think we're good to proceed. Okay? Again, today's focus is not on licensing. That's always up to you to follow end-user license agreements. Many of you have enterprise licenses at work. You might have 365-day trials from VMware rather than a somewhat rather cheesy and annoying 60-day that the rest of the world gets. So that's up to you to deal with. But once you have it going, you just saw 55 days left in my trial. I already said I installed this last weekend. And there it is in the bottom right. There's no smoke and mirrors here. This is ESXi, publicly available 5.1. This build number refers to what came out April 25th. So this is what it looks like. And in my case, I automatically start some VMs. All right. The one I wanted to show you that's probably easiest to get going with would be this one. Winning webcam. Here's your summary tab. All kinds of information about it. There's that private IP at home. So yes, it's 10.10.1.120. 2 virtual-list CPUs have been given to it. There's my host name, and there's the host that it's running on. A machine I just simply call it ESXi. All right. Now, and you can also see it's actually running on a SATA 3 SSD. So we're going to get obviously decent speed rebooting and so forth. So if we open up the console, That's one way to do it. It's shoveling all this over Hamachi. We can also do this over remote desktop connection. We'll see how the speed goes. So lovely. There was some Windows updates. I've included. Usually it's Patch Tuesday, right? Did I get hit with some updates Thursday night? Anyone read what that was about? I never even bothered to look, but yeah, that's the Windows world. You guys can all laugh at that, but all right. We can reboot. You'll see it should reboot rather fast. We're on a solid state drive, right? And to give you a little more elbow room, let's open up console full window. And it opened up on the other desktop. Sorry, I got dual desktops going here. I didn't miss much. All right, what are we going to do here? Yes, you can. One advantage to Windows 8 is you can just slap in any old USB cam, and the driver set is pretty huge for finding the driver. No Logitech or anything, you just shove it in. It's going to work. Thanks for a quick demo. But how do you assign USB to a virtual machine? Let me show you. A quick version. So I'm looking at the properties of the VM. Hit VM, edit, properties. I added a controller to it so that a USB 2.0 or 1.1 controller is added to the virtual machine so that device manager sees a USB device. And then I pointed and said, add my USB device. So right now I've already added the Logitech webcam. It's already in use. But these are some other devices like the CyberPower UPS that I use for automated shutdown. You just click next and attach it to the VM. So we can actually yank that and reinstall it. Okay, so we're almost there. Any questions on what I've shown you so far? Just some of the basics that I'm trying to show you. Commodity consumer stuff is getting easier with these enterprise products that really are not meant for home tinkering. Nor are you supported in any way from VMware, or frankly from Microsoft. You're using Hyper-V and unsupported hardware as well. Yeah, question?
The machine, the server this is all running on, is named ESXi.
Yep.
Can you describe it? I saw obviously bays of hard drives, SATA.
Sure.
Solid state, and how much memory? Just like 32 gig?
32, yeah.
Can you just repeat the question?
Yes, I'll repeat the question. Let's bring it up while I'm talking. So the question was, what's the physical configuration? I briefly showed you a teaser picture. That's the motherboard. There's the 4 DIMM slots. Not 8, right? It's not server class Xeon that costs twice a lot more. It's just a Core i7 ASRock motherboard. The reason? ASUS and MSI did not support pass-through. Remember I talked about pass-through and moving the USB through to a VM? It didn't work on those other motherboards. Who'd have thunk it? You wouldn't know it. It was crickets on the web as you search for this in March of 2011. So when I started my website in June of 2011, it was one of my first posts. Got it working. Here's the motherboard brands that actually work that are affordable, under 220 bucks. That sure beats a Supermicro or a Titan, which admittedly have great features, but are going to cost you a lot more when you put ECC memory there. I then waited a year for the price to go down. I think I got the 32 gig of RAM from Zscale to fit these 4 DIMM slots at, I think it was about 200 something bucks, 230. So that was key. So this article kind of gets into why I picked what I did. And it even gets into little things that ended up being important, like new power supplies tend to want a UPS that doesn't buzz and hum when you use it. So if you have an old APC lying around, you plug in a new PFC power supply, power factor correction power supply, it'll give off a weird buzz and hum and not be particularly compatible. So this article lists all the parts. And the memory, let's see what they cost today. Yeah, it's well under, it was under 230. Kind of just waiting for a decent price. Any other questions about physical hardware? Yeah.
So are these parts still readily available?
Yeah, it is now 2 years later. So it's getting a little harder. Some of them. There's your memory. Oh, it's still 230. Price hasn't really changed there. And over on Amazon, we'll see a different price. No price. Okay. It's interesting. No price show.
Is that 6 new?
6 new. Yeah, it's weird that they didn't even pick one. Just showing me all of them. But yeah, the price is higher on Amazon. Interesting. And then you use one for $190. All right. So yeah, the question is, can you still buy all the parts? No, it is 2 years later. The thing is, let me show you this article. There's something kind of interesting going on. I'll go to just my homepage, the root here. Scroll down and show you Haswell, right? So you're starting to read about Haswell and the next chipset from Intel. Well, again, it's consumer focused. Here we go. Unfortunately, it looks like here we are 2 years later since I built the machine, and you're still stuck at a 32 gig 4 DIMM configuration. They really want you to buy a Xeon if you want 8 DIMM slots. It's strange because there was a Z77 motherboard a year and a half ago that had 8 slots for enthusiasts. It's all a little weird. I don't know what's going to happen yet. None of this stuff's really shipping quite yet anyway. So I'll have to watch this space. But that is a good question. When you're shopping, if you were to build one today, it'd be kind of nifty if it was built on the latest CPU and chipset and all. And right now it looks like Intel's kind of pigeonholing you into 4 DIMM slots. And when you read the spec sheet, even if they do come out with higher capacity memory chips to go to 64, the chipset won't support it. You're still stuck at 32 perhaps. Kind of artificially maybe keeping you to try to get you over to Xeons in that server class to really try to go to 64. Because really, you must be doing virtualization to build much memory, right? It's kind of rare you're going to have Linux or Windows or anything actually use that. I comfortably juggle this many VMs. What is that? Actually, this is my temporary build. Usually I have about 12 running. We can kind of look at this little SolarWinds freebie that I've logged about, and it gives you a rather nice view that you can leave running in a system tray. Admittedly, it is a Windows utility only, but it's showing me there's my VMware version, how much CPU I'm using right now, 11%, and I'm showing you a CentOS instance. That's the appliance I downloaded from CyberPower. I bought a $120 UPS from Amazon, plugged in the USB cable, downloaded an appliance from CyberPower for free, plugged the virtual USB cable like I already showed you guys how to do, and now it powers lost in my house, which has been frequent in the last 2 years, as you guys know, snow and other things happening. It automatically shuts down all the virtual machines, and then ESXi itself shuts down gracefully, and then it just turns off, so I recover. It's kind of important when I'm using things like a solid-state caching RAID controller that caches reads and writes. You don't really want an abrupt purple screen to death or nastiness happening. You kind of want to do a graceful shutdown. So those little things, very data center concepts, the way you protect your data at work, home, it's kind of what I enjoy doing. All right.
I have 2 questions actually. So
Yep, I'll keep doing it. I'll set up for demo while you're talking. Go ahead.
sure. So first, what's the load time you actually have with the power supply you currently have at home to have everything virtually shut down?
So yeah, it's a 600 watt power supply. It's only using 130 when idle, and only goes up to like 160 if I bang away at the virtual machines and hit their CPUs really hard with some benchmark utility.
Yeah.
The runtime's like 7 minutes, not that long. But it only takes me about 2 minutes to do the automated shutdown.
Okay.
From when the USB cable goes out, my phone immediately beeps, warning me, your house is going down,
Yeah.
and it's all shut off within about 2 minutes. All right.
That's pretty efficient. All right. The second question I had.
Yeah.
So you built the hardware 2 years ago.
Yep.
And you obviously had to have some sort of guideline of how to put this together. So now going 2 years ahead to current date, what are you using to future upgrade to if you need to build a new box? You know what I'm saying? Obviously you're into that stack with the motherboard. You know, that's something that we're unaware of right now. You know.
Yep.
So outside of performance boards, Googling it, whatever methodology, what is your way of actually looking to build a future new box,
Yep. So good points. I'll repeat the question. So the question was, if I was rebuilding today, what are the things I'd watch out for to make sure I pick a motherboard that I like? A couple things changed. One is ESXi 4.1 and 5.0 supported pass-through of a USB 3.0 card I bought, a PCI card. You'd say, here's a card in the slot, pass it through. Okay. By the way, that's a live view of home. So I'm trying to convince you that we are live here. And if I can get the camera showing, yeah, 52 minutes after the hour, and there's the second hand. You're looking at live video from my home 110 miles away. That's the server. There's the SATA drives, the SSDs in there. There's a USB slot at the top that's going to the webcam that you're viewing right now. And there's the RAID enclosure I told you about, with a little light telling me RAID 5 is fine and happy. I can also monitor RAID health as well. So if it goes funky and a drive has died, Windows is easy for all these commodity products to do. VMware Hyper-V, you got to think a little more and make sure your phone's going to alert you when a drive goes. Those little things. But back to your question about shopping, what would you do on a motherboard? Passing through USB doesn't seem to be VMware's focus, I'll say. playing with 5.0 and 5.1, they broke it when they moved from 5.0 to 5.1. And I played with some more recent builds, including this update one, and VM pass-through still doesn't work so great. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We're going to point to the ESXi host. When I say host, I'm talking about Core i7 physical machine with 32 gig of memory. Click on the configuration tab, and then click on up here we've got properties, and I'll just point out that to be filled by OEM. ASRock didn't bother, right? They don't really expect you to be throwing VMware in there. They didn't throw their brand in there, they should have. Whatever. Normally it would say IBM, HP, Dell, whatever server class stuff you have. Alright? But under advanced settings, direct path IO. This just broke. Had this working great in the previous ones. You could point to your, here's my USB card. It's all 4 of these USB cards. It's got 4 little mass media chipsets on there controlling the USB controller. You can just click, 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 assign them to a VM, or assign 2 to one VM and 2 to another. They're all working 5.0. It's broken 6. What does that mean? That means ASRock, ASUS, MSI, and Gigabyte. Probably I just shop for all 4 again. It wouldn't really matter as much. I don't have to look for that funky feature I was looking for anymore because it seems like they might be dropping it. That's one thing. Is that a big deal? No, because one hopes you break the 2 terabyte boundary in future versions of VMware and Hyper-V. And this stuff kind of goes by the wayside. You need to support USB 3.0, right? So I don't think it's a deal breaker. It's just right now we're in this limbo phase because this stuff's not out yet. And I have no compelling reason to move. What would I spend $1,000 to get a 20% speed boost? It's going to just keep
The whole
dropping.
thing dies, the system board dies.
Yeah, then I'm shopping for motherboard.
That's what I'm saying, so then obviously now you're gonna have to retool, rethink what you need to purchase.
I actually have another motherboard in the house. I have an identical machine built. Yep.
So you're doing your due diligence.
But it's me and doing other fun stuff.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
No, good point. It's good to have gear like that, and I did kind of think to the future, meaning if it broke, we'd be buying a new gaming system and I'd get the hand-me-down motherboard, because I have an identical motherboard, just slip it in this thing and have it running within an hour. So that worked for me. It meant I had 2 of the same motherboard in the house, giving me a little peace of mind that I can live out more than 2 years. Because you know it's going to corrupt at some point. Yeah, it's commodity stuff. Any other questions? These are awesome questions. This is fun. Time? Sorry, I missed it. 5. Okay. Finishing up the demo, I barely showed you networking, so I do want to focus on that. Networking tab right here. What are we looking at? Hopefully you can see from the back row fairly well. Here's a physical NIC, right? If I click on properties, we have an Intel 82572 gigabit Ethernet controller. All right, there you go, that's one NIC. What's this other one I've got over here if I slide on down? Realtek, that's one of the ones that came with it on the motherboard. I actually have a second one. Anyhow, so more important, why do I have 2 and what am I doing special about this one? Why did I call this one VPN? Well, you remember I started mentioning Hamachi is the glue that's holding this whole demo together. It's how I'm connecting to home and all that. Well, check this out. There's a little piece in there. So we look at the virtual switch. Think of it as software Ethernet switch running in my hypervisor stack. You go to the security tab and it says promiscuous mode accept. Some of you in the room know what that means, but basically it's accepting kind of forged packets the way Hamachi's working. If I didn't turn this on, same deal with Hyper-V by the way, there's an analogous setting in there. You're not going to get an Hamachi VPN appliance, a VM that I leave running that I call Tunnel, Windows 7 in this case. That wouldn't work. It just, you tried it, you tried to connect, it wouldn't connect. Those are the little bugaboos, the little things where you're Googling away and weekends trying to get it working. My site does try to solve that with these super guys, trying to say, VMware soup to nuts. I have an hour-and-a-half video of everything from shoving in the DVD and setting up the BIOS to boot from the USB key, installing the USB key, configuring it, editing the host file, throwing a few ISOs in there, and installing Windows 8. It's all in an hour-and-a-half video on YouTube. And it's long and a little dry. I don't really cut it, but I try to keep it moving the whole time. And by the end of an hour and a half, you'll convince yourself, this isn't rocket science. You can do it. It just takes a bit of time and a bit of effort. Yep.
I'm sure you don't go through all the steps that you have in your video every single time you set this up. You have automation scripts that you run and roll through to get these preloaded anytime you rebuild an ESXi.
Well, I hinted a couple things. Well, I said it. Beta testing is something I do anyway. And 60-day trials. And if it only takes me an hour or two to set up, I don't actually bother scripting, although I should. But if I really had to script a deployment at ESXi, which would be a graceful way to make it less of a nuisance when the 60-day time bomb runs out, that would need another machine. And again, I was trying to reduce 5-6 machines I had running in my basement down to 1. So I just haven't bothered. It's met my needs, and I don't do it that often. Frankly, it wasn't until the last 2 months I started horsing around. So it lived for 22 months straight.
Yeah.
It wasn't a big deal. Yeah. Great question. Yes?
Can you give us some guidelines based on how many VMs you want to run simultaneously? What kind of hardware you would recommend?
So
What was the question?
the question was about how many VMs you want to run simultaneously and what kind of hardware you want. These are lightly loaded VMs. This is a 10-year-old T30 Lenovo laptop that bit the dust, back when it was IBM branded actually. When it bit the dust, the hard drive was okay. I pulled it out, cloned it to a VM, and let it live as a virtual machine. A ghost of its former self. There's no physical laptop running anymore, but the hard drive and its old apps that were locked to Windows XP and would never license or move along can now live on. It's a personal cloud for one of my family members. It uses up, let's take a look. You'll see how much memory is in use, very little. So, save there, wrap up the demo. And the question was about how much memory is it using and how many would you want to try to juggle. Take a look at the resource allocation tab. So yeah, if you like fiddly bits and knobs, twist and turn, VMware and Hyper-V, you'll enjoy playing with this stuff. It's using about 1 gig of RAM, all right? There's actually a decent sized app running in that thing, left running right now. What does that mean? Well, you can easily run 30 VMs if each of them are only running 512 meg of memory. Hyper-V and VMware do a lot better memory sharing than any sort of client side, Oracle VirtualBox or VMware Workstation would ever handle on a laptop. This is the beauty of leaving it running on a decent server in your home with 32 gig of RAM. You can just double click and quickly connect to these VMs. You don't have to worry about powering something on. I guess that was it. 1 minute left, barely, not even. Any other questions? Now, I have no idea that camera in the back. You're getting wide angle, you can actually see that. I don't know. But
It's the wide angle. Yep.
so hopefully, I don't know how useful that replay will be for seeing the fonts and all, but almost pretty much everything I did today, if you click on presentations on the website, you'll also find it. And if you have an interest in this kind of thing, and you want to do this more, consider these buttons in the upper right, follow on Google Plus or Twitter. That'll help keep in touch as I do more podcasts. I like to do podcasts, Google Hangouts. Some of you, how many people have ever done a Google Plus Hangout with a webcam? That's awesome. So if you have some interest, just try to follow me, keep in touch as I do podcasts and try to solicit people like you that might actually build something. Try to help a bit too. That's the fun of it. Coming up afterward, if you have more questions. Thank you very much.